I always kind of crack up that scientists thought 10 strands of our 12-strand DNA were junk and served no purpose. A fourth grader could see that makes no sense. They just didn't know what it did, so they said junk. As we're expanding that bandwidth, we not only know it's not junk, but we are letting in information and connection and energies and frequencies that I believe are really in line with our own design. So becoming who we really are. And as we do that, the control programs aren't going to work.
Welcome, 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 beautiful souls, back to Cosmic Conversations. I'm your host, Hayden Crawford, and today I have the honour of sitting down with a truly inspiring guest, Judith Corvin-Blackburn. Now, Judith is a psychotherapist and the author of 4 transformational books, including the 6D Ascension Journey, activating the light codes of our 12-strand DNA. Her work goes far beyond the typical lens of DNA activation. What makes her approach so powerful is her process of helping us to release the disempowering beliefs that keep us stuck in victim consciousness, beliefs that have kept our star DNA dormant. Through her work, Judith also illuminates how ancient societies can guide us in co-creating a new earth, rooted in a higher frequency of love, peace, justice, and expanded consciousness. So I'm so excited to dive into this conversation with Judith today, where we'll be exploring her journey, her books, and the deeper truths of our ascension path. So welcome, Judith. It's absolutely beautiful to have you here with me today.
Thank you, Hayden. I noticed your dog wanted to join as well.
That's
I don't
right,
know.
yeah. Bailey and Monty, they always like getting into the thick of things. You know, they're seekers as well, seekers of
Yes,
dogmatic truth.
dog the truth. Okay.
So your journey, Judith, so far, what inspired you to write the 60 Ascension Journey, and how did your own awakening path actually shape the book?
Yeah. Well, my awakening really happened in my late 20s, which was in the 1970s. So it was a long time ago. But, uh, and so I've been on the path since then. Which is, of course, life changing. But clearly, that was a long time ago. And I've developed and developed and developed. I just reread a book I wrote 30 years ago, and I was surprised to see that it was more of it was emotional self-help, but many of the spiritual principles that have been so clear to me now were still in there. So it's a thread that I've carried for many, many years. Um, Books that I write, especially the last two, harder to remember the early ones, but the last two I started out with, I'm not writing a book, and bam, there it was. So that's true of the 12D of the 6D Ascension Journey. The working title I had was Entering Earth's New Reality. The publisher worked with me. Their Inner Traditions is wonderful, but they did not use my working title as the full title. But I think it's significant because what was really standing out to me was how all of the guideposts that we have been conditioned to believe delineate our reality were falling. You People were like operating next door to each other in different realities. And again, the United States has been so interesting on one level, fake facts, things. It's like, what? So, what became very clear is that we can't rely on external information. We really have to tune inward and call in, our guides or whatever people connect with on a higher consciousness level, and clear enough of our um, old dysfunction that this whole Western culture carries, in order to be able to tell, hey, is this accurate, or is this, does this have some truth to it or not? And I really believe ultimately it's being able to feel into the energy of it. So that was how the book sort of got moving. Again, I had no intent to write it, and then it was right there, ready.
I find that really interesting how books just materialize when they're supposed to. I've just literally 6 months ago finished my own book, which I self-published, called the Starseed Ascension Journey, and it took me 8 years to do it. But I had no intention of wanting to ever write a book, and so I get it. And then a deck of cards, and now another deck of cards, and I'm like, why is this happening? But it's meant to get out there into the world, isn't it? So you've obviously got a very important message to share with the rest of humanity. But what makes your book, this one specifically, different? Because there are quite a lot of books out there on DNA activation. Why do you feel that your approach and teaching stand apart from others?
Well, that's a great question, Hayden. And there's so many of us being good teachers around the planet, and part of it is that we draw in people with energies that are aligned with us. So many of us are saying pretty much the same thing, but we're needed, so to speak, right, to pull in the people that need to hear what we have to say. But the other piece, though, is that as a psychotherapist, I mean, I've been um, doing what I call transpersonal psychotherapy, which is basically helping people clear the emotional field, clear the old beliefs, so that their soul can really shine through, which is what we all need right now. And I understand how the psyche works, and I understand process. So what I find, especially with my 60 Ascension Journeys literally being released. Let's see, it's the second. So it's being released on the 9th of this month, although some early copies have come out. But the feedback I got from Activating Your 5D Frequency, which was the book prior to this, and when I worked with students that had read the book and they were so into it and excited about it, but then I found they'd be all upset if they weren't always in their 5D frequency. We're human. We're just, in many ways, at the beginning of this great transformation. And we are not, we don't grow linearly. So I do think there are so many tools which I'd like to present and help people with, that help you when you go crashing back into 3D frequency, to one, be really gentle and to understand, okay, this is part of the process. And then have some tools so you don't stay there very long until you crash back again. Okay.
Mm. That's right. It's interesting because I was having a chat with Pia Orlane and Cullen Baird Smith the other day. So they wrote Lakmar. They are Pleiadian channelers. So they channel galactic wisdom through their books. Um, and they were saying that, that we can be on a slow train, or we can be on a fast train as we sort of align with the version of New Earth that we that resonates with us. And I said to them, well, sometimes I feel like I'm on the fast train, and a lot of the time I feel like I'm on the slow train. So it kind of makes perfect sense what you're saying, how we kind of dip in and out of like this higher vibration where we feel like everything's aligning, we're feeling good, we're feeling the love. And yet other days, and it might not be anything that triggers it. You can go back into judgment, into feeling resentment towards people. Like just this morning on my walk with my dog, I always take Monty and Bailey for a walk around the block in the morning, in separately, because it's too much hassle to try and do them both at the same time. And sometimes when people walk past, I go into real judgment about how they act when they see my dogs, because my dogs are harmless, and sometimes they get a bit excitable and they don't jump up at people, but they might sort of look like they're going to. And I see people flinching away, and then in my head, I'm going, what's wrong with people? Why are they so? And then I'm thinking, and then I'm beating myself up constantly for having all these horrible thoughts about people and judgments. So this is what you're talking about, isn't it? How it's just these normal, everyday feelings that we get, towards other people. And then we recognize that we've slipped out of 5D, we're not in alignment with unity consciousness, and then we can go on a bit of a downward spiral. Is that right? How do you get then people to start pivoting and start climbing on the upward spiral again?
Well, I think that it helps when we understand this is just the way it is. There's nothing wrong with you that happens. You are we've all been conditioned in this very dysfunctional world. And and this is the shadow part. And especially one of the parts of the dysfunction is everything's either all good or all bad. When in fact, we hold everything. We're holographic, right? And and we're gonna have shadow thoughts. And it's not fun. I mean, I watch mine come through and go, oh God. But then what I do, which I would put out as a tool, is to go, yeah, you noticed and you let the thought come through. Because if we don't allow those thoughts into awareness, they stay in the unconscious and become more powerful, and then can really get projected out and do harm. So to be able to, and I watch myself, Hayden, where I go, oh, I didn't have that thought. And then I went, oh, yeah, I did have that thought, right?
Yeah.
And I
Yeah.
don't like, I can own it.
You can own it.
So,
Great. So it's about owning those thought patterns, not trying to suppress them or hide them, because then they get bigger and stronger, and that's when they can sort of manifest as psychopathic behavior.
right, right. That either does harm to the self, which is doing harm to everyone, or to others, which is doing harm to the self.
Yeah.
So,
Okay. So could you just briefly explain the difference between 5D and 6D to people that are new to these concepts?
yes. Well, and there are many different lenses to multidimensionality. The lens that I I use and has been a foundation for my books is one that Barbara Hand Clow introduced to modern times in her book Alchemy of Nine Dimensions. And it's a fabulous theory. It probably originated in Atlantis and went over to Egypt. I found there's a little footnote in Barbara's book that had talked about the Hellenic mystery schools that used the 9D access that Plato brought forth. Anyway, I'm not answering your question really clearly, but anyway, historically, it's kind of interesting. The other lens that's very popular and also accurate is through sacred geometry. So there's many ways to look at these dimensions, but I have found that teachers around the planet pretty much agree on basic qualities of 5D, and I think on 6D as well. So from my perspective, we're going from 3D, 4D humans to 5D, 6D humans. The 3D, 4D, I won't go into all the details of it, but basically the right hemisphere of our brains, our emotional selves take in the 4D frequency. If we haven't cleared our emotional field, it's pretty unhealthy. Where 3D, we know what 3D is. We wake up, we get up, we're linear, the sun comes up, blah, 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 right? But it's like the physical part of us is more in 3D, and the emotional, spiritual part is more in 4D, but it's very limited. And so, as we're expanding, as we're activating these DNA strands, which lots of people are talking about, um, we move into that fifth dimensional frequency. And the primary characteristics of the fifth dimension, is unconditional love, which is of self and self, including self and others. A lot of people go, oh, yeah, I love everybody, but we got to love ourselves as well, which is not always an easy task. Um, Non-judgment, which you mentioned earlier, unity consciousness, which you also mentioned, and unbridled creativity, which I love. It's just, that's where we're moving into a place where we have really exciting times where everybody can thrive. The sixth dimension is where we create reality from. It's the quantum field. It's what Plato called the world of forms, where anything you can think, imagine, um, that is either a concrete thing, a quality, idea, exists in an energy form, and I think in geometric form in the sixth dimension. We're always creating our reality, but in 3D, 4D humanness, we usually create it unconsciously. And thus we end up with a mess, so to speak. So as we go into this evolutionary place of more and more operating out of our fifth dimensional frequency, we also are able to utilize the sixth dimension in ways to create conscious reality. The other piece is the sixth dimension holds sacred geometry, which I just have been learning more and more about. As I was writing this book, I knew I couldn't write a book about the sixth dimension without learning more about it. And I mean, this is how we communicate with the cosmos. So put those two together, and we are in a really good place. How's that?
Yeah, it's fascinating. So it really is tapping into your cosmic consciousness when we
Yes.
start tapping into the 6D realm. So then my question to you is, what's the difference between the sixth dimension and the oversoul?
Oh, that's very interesting. Let me ponder that for a minute. Probably the oversoul is way beyond these dimensions. Um, and I don't know that one is really going to know that until one leaves the body and goes into a whole other realm of consciousness. Um, so that would be my first feeling, is that the oversoul, in the way that I understand it, parts of our souls simultaneously are in many different places.
Yeah,
And
absolutely. So what? So really, with the oversoul, is multi-dimensional. So it goes into higher planes of consciousness through like the gyroscopic multiverse, whereas the sixth dimension is still accessible to us as humans. Yeah.
exactly, exactly.
Got it.
Yes.
Okay. All right then. So just referring back to victim consciousness, because this is where the majority of humanity, unfortunately, still are. Although I know a lot of the people that I speak with, they don't like using the word victim because it is so limiting, isn't it, in so many ways. But you talk about disempowering beliefs creating a reality of victim consciousness. Can you explain how these beliefs shut down our star DNA and how we can actually begin to release them?
Okay, big question. Let me see where I'd start on this. Um, it's a little unclear whether our beliefs have developed as the star DNA closed down. So, sort of the which came chicken or the egg kind of came first. Um, However, once that DNA closed down through what I call the dimensional descent, and when I was teaching early on, when I was teaching a multidimensional class, it hit me in the middle of it. That's the biblical fall. Now, they blamed Eve. We could argue that that was obviously a patriarchal view coming in and has been reinterpreted and misinterpreted. But I think that the storyline is accurate, that we had high consciousness societies on the planet that very much would represent what we might call Eden, probably Lemuria more than Atlantis. But and as things went out of balance, why did they go out of balance? Did we create this consciously? Do we want to see let's see what it's like to be 3D? I don't know. I don't think anybody had an idea that it would be so awful, frankly. Which doesn't mean there aren't still very sweet things in there, but we created a mess. But I think it was, again, a process, little by little by little. Many indigenous cultures were able to keep those higher frequencies until colonialism or what have you came in and said, hey, let's kill you and do bad things to you. But what we call civilization, Western civilization, really operated out of a very low consciousness. And little by little, that star DNA got shut down, whether it was from trauma, cataclysmic. Barbara Hand Cloud talks about, and I've not read her book, but I know what she was saying about it, cataclysmic geological kinds of things created global trauma. And then, of course, little by little, everybody's gotten traumatized to some degree or another. And as that happened, it allowed people, perhaps, other dimensions, to come in and say, let's see what we can mess with these folks even more. Let's see if we can control them, because they don't know who they are. If you don't know who you are, you can be easily manipulated. So that's the beginning of the story of getting shut down. In terms of reopening, one of the things I put in this current book is a chart of expanding our perceptual bandwidth. And so I was able to kind of do it in a visual way. If you imagine that we have unlimited potential bandwidth of what we can perceive, and just sort of stretch that line out, and then imagine two vertical lines saying, oh no, this is all you can believe. So there's been a planetary awakening, whether it's the photons coming in, there are numerous factors that played into it. I came of age in the 60s and 70s, which was a very exciting time for consciousness. It's when, at least in the States, and I know you're not in the West, but I'm dumping. Australia obviously has been equally Western cultured, right, since the England decided to colonize it. And so, we've all been through this very limited bandwidth. And in that limited bandwidth, of course, there's the scare tactic that if you go beyond the bandwidth, you're crazy. When a collective group emerges, like in the 60s and 70s, I say, wait a second, we're all getting this information coming in. Then that collective was able to hold that, no, maybe the mass culture didn't like it, but there was something much larger than what we had been made to believe. And, again, similarly to a personal process, the collective process has expanded and contracted and expanded and contracted. But I believe we're close, at least, to a tipping point where enough people get it. They're going, mm-mm. And in a sense, it's created some of the new chaos because, all right, you know the old stuff isn't right. Well, then what's the new stuff? And what are you going to believe? So, um, now the last part, I know there was a last part to your question. I don't feel I answered fully.
Yeah, and it was just that, and these beliefs, once they've been identified, how can we begin to release them?
Okay. Okay. Well, one is, of course, self-observation. Just like you were speaking into, you walk your dog, you notice the judgments that pop up. And that's a practice. And the more we can do, the more we expand our bandwidth, the more we can really observe ourselves in a loving way with humor. I think humor is a hugely important characteristic. Um, and not to take ourselves too seriously, not to take the show on this planet too seriously. That doesn't mean not to have compassion or values about it, but when you look at it from a higher perspective, it's like, okay, what are these beings doing? Right? And of course, we participate in that, but so that's being able to laugh at ourselves as well. So I think humor and self-observation is super important in that. And the other piece, and this was really part of the motivation when I wrote this book, is to expand our container so that we can hold everything. We may not agree. I think it's perfectly fine to be discerning, especially if we know internally, no, this particular view doesn't seem kind or life producing or what have you. Um, but simultaneously, people holding very different beliefs are still um, have there is still a commonality or can be a commonality. We begin to hold this whole container to see that. And it's really not what you believe, it's where your heart is. And if you're putting out loving energy, it'll work out somehow.
That's beautiful. And it's so true. We need to get out of the realm of the mind and back into the heart space where, that's where true unity exists. Now, light codes is something that's quite a new concept for a lot of people as well. So, what are light codes and how do they actually activate the 12-strand DNA?
Well, actually, I think it's the opposite. I think as the DNA shifts, we have more access to these light codes. They are, again, from my perspective, other teachers may put it in differently, but essentially they hold cosmic knowledge that has we have been programmed away from. And we know the planet is being hit with all these photons, and they appear to be holding a lot of this cosmic knowledge so that we have more access to it. However, if we are still only firing off of our two-strand DNA and stuck in here, we're not going to get the information and we're not going to be able to use the information. As we're expanding our bandwidth and being more open and more heart-centered, as that information, I believe that's when more of the DNA strands fire up, and it allows us to not only know this information or be able to interpret this information, but also to begin to integrate it more into ourselves.
Hmm. So the 12-strand DNA, obviously there's a lot of theories. I mean, obviously the collective trauma from times like Atlantis that have started shutting down over a period of time, the 12 strands. But also, you sort of made reference to whilst we were vulnerable, that there was an infiltration. Are we talking about Anunnaki?
I have stayed away from that a bit, not because I don't, certainly it could be true. There's something going on, and they probably are coming in from all of these star civilizations. Some are very highly conscious and some are not. Things are a lot bigger than we have been trained to see. So if I, and I really don't like the word conspiracy. So, because energetically, it's like, there's something about it. Do I think that there are other dimensional beings that are connected to things here? Yes. I feel like I can say that pretty clearly. I don't spend a lot of time about that, partly, well, for two reasons. One, unity consciousness, if there are, we're them as well. And so it sort of gives any negative entities power by putting a lot of focus on them. Um, and that actually was, again, part of the motivation in writing the book, in terms of knowing people that were just like really so focused on that. And I just didn't feel it was helpful. Let me put it that way. Um, so, um, so yes, there's control programs. I think that would be the way to say it. However, we don't have to be controlled by them. When we take our power and, go, wait a second, you can't control me. So as we do that, again, I think that's part of the process of lighting up more of these DNA strands. The typically I've been asked in interviews about that, and I always kind of crack up that scientists thought 10 strands of our 12-strand DNA were junk and served no purpose. A fourth grader could see that makes no sense. They just didn't know what it did, so they said junk. As we're expanding that bandwidth, we not only know it's not junk, but we are letting in information and connection and energies and frequencies that I believe are really in line with our own design. So becoming who we really are.
Mm.
And as we do that, the control programs aren't going to work.
100%. Yeah. So it's really aligning more with our divinity and our sovereignty, and also, our cosmology. So what you're speaking about then is your galactic origins, isn't it, fundamentally? And claiming that as the essence of who you are, that that there is no separation. So this multi-dimensional aspect of self that exists simultaneously on different star systems, like Andromeda or Arcturus or Lyra or the Pleiades. Do you have a specific connection to all or one of those?
Yeah, I'm really Pleiadian.
Yeah, I thought so, actually.
It's interesting because as you understand it more, you can kind of see
Hmm.
people, sort of where they might have more originated from. I think I have a little Syrian, and there's so many more star systems that are coming in that I don't know enough about. I'm sure we all have some hybrid kinds of things, but my primary piece is very much Pleiadians. My guides, and I don't have names, and I'm more kinesthetic than visual, so it's more I feel things. But my guides can be very funny. And that is a quality as I'm learning of the Pleiadians. They really like to have some fun. They like to play. They lighten things up. And of course, it's very heart-centered. The other piece, though, this may be going a little farther than your question, but it's something I'm kind of excited about. On the Pleiades, and this information originally came through my dear Pleiadian sister Eva Marquez, who wrote the book Activating Your Cosmic DNA. I don't know whether you're familiar with that, but she did a kind of reading hypnosis kind of thing with me, and talked about Alcyon, which was the major planet there, and the temple of Alcyon that I was teaching there. And as soon as she said that, it really clicked. I got it. And so many times I'll do some visualizations of being, because the temple has a university. literally a university where beings from all parts of the universe show up and connect with each other and share information. And at one point, I was kind of doing a visualization about it, and I thought, well, how do they communicate? Now, on one hand, it's telepathic, but I got this visual image of these very cool holograms that can just, through thought, show up and everybody could understand them without having to have a common language. So, there's a lot of cool stuff out there.
Yeah, that's beautiful. And you know what? It makes perfect sense to me when you're talking about that because um, when the Cosmic Family Oracle cards came through to me, I sort of made reference to the different galactic races, and a group of them are the Pleiadians, and there is one card. It's called Alcyon, which is for a lot of people they believe that Alcyon is like the great central sun of our solar system, and the mystery schools that exist, throughout the cosmos, but around the Pleiades and Sirius, on Sirius B and the Blue Lodge. There it is. So this is the Pleiadian philosopher card, Alcyon. And
Uh,
you can see there that she's there in a temple. Um, it's almost like a university, a school where she is responsible. And it's card number 7, which in numerology is about exploring the mysteries of life, the deeper meaning in life. So
I'm going
that
to have to get cards. Those look great.
Oh, thank you. They were a joy to create, actually. I absolutely loved doing them. But so it does make perfect sense what you're saying. So that Pleiadian energy, for me, it's Andromedan. It was about it must be 8 years ago now, and I was going through my midlife awakening, and a lot of my shadows were coming to the surface. I was given the information that when I was asking in the middle of the night where I was from, I don't even know why I was asking, but I couldn't sleep, and I'd been tossing and turning for weeks, and all this guilt and shame was coming up to the surface that I couldn't process. And I was like, well, where am I from? And this word just came in, Andromeda. And I had never even heard of it before. Literally, I thought it was like Star Trek or something. So I Googled it the next day, and then I was blown away by the traits of the Andromedan starseeds, because that's when I started first learning about it. And I was like, well, this is totally who I am. The nomad, lived in several countries, here to help people with self-love and self confidence issues, and also rediscover their inner wisdom, live in faith more. And I was like, okay, so there's something in all of this. So I've always identified more with the Andromedan energy, like you have with the Pleiadian, but I also am aware that I have incarnations in the Pleiades. So I attract a lot of Pleiadians to me, and Arcturus and Sirius, and even Lyra, So now, like, it's almost like as you evolve with all of this information and the 12 strand DNA starts repairing, then you can start realizing actually that you are all of it, really, and it becomes clearer. So it almost becomes more difficult to identify, doesn't it, with just one galactic race specifically.
Yeah, I'm just kind of at the edge of that.
Yeah,
Uh, but yes, I think that's really true because, well, again, we're everything.
yeah,
And, that part of the mystery is at this point in Earth consciousness is there's so much more to learn about all of these star nations and how we're connected and et cetera. So,
I
but
know.
but it's interesting, I think, Hayden, that there tends to be a predominant, at least at this stage in our development.
There
Again,
certainly does, because I think humans like to identify, don't we, with one a specific thing, particularly because it makes us feel safe, and it helps us to kind of almost like that container that you're talking about. It helps us feel safe whilst we explore slightly new concept. I love that term that you used actually with the bandwidth, because in color therapy, we see the visible form of light as being a bandwidth that we can sort of almost perceive reality with. And outside of that, you've obviously got ultraviolet, infrared, but then you've got so many other colors when you cross over. When people have near-death experiences, they come back. They always say, there was this beautiful wall of color of colors we've never been able to see on Earth before. And so you know that, really we are very limited in our perspectives here. And, it's in recognition of that is where we can start going, okay, so what lays outside of that? It's like when you try and perceive the universe, isn't it? You can't perceive how big it is. You sort of always put a container around that. You go, oh, well, it must end somewhere. Well, why? Why does it have to end somewhere? But people can't perceive infinity because it's vast and it's it presents itself as being potentially frightening, doesn't it?
Well, I think what it is the left brain, and we've been so left brained for so long, is incapable of um, understanding that you can perceive just by feeling it. You don't have to have, the container, but I do agree the container makes it safe, and there's nothing wrong with the container as long as you don't get locked in. So, maybe we're grabbing these containers for now, and then we'll blow them open on the next stage of development or however that works.
And it's funny because we spoke briefly before this interview started today about Three Eye Atlas, and I know that you're not specifically sort of a cosmologist, or you don't go, you're not a stargazer, but you are aware of it. But I feel like humanity is almost ready for full disclosure, both within the secret government and the regular government, and I do feel that this comet is not really that. It's because of the timing of it and how it aligns with numerology and the planets and how everything seems to be perfectly timed, almost like the construction of ancient civilizations and temples across the planet. So it feels like it is a collective group of advanced civilizations, the star nations, a collective that are coming in, and they're going to be entering our solar system, and actually getting close to the Earth. Like the bullseye is around about the 29th of October, so just in a few
Oh,
weeks' time. And the trajectory of this, it's said to go behind the sun, interestingly enough. So
interesting.
my feeling is that we are at a point, where the collective dreaming has got to a place where we are, we're ready for the truth. And I feel like, there will be a group of people that maybe will find it hard to integrate the new Earth. And I know that, for you, a lot of the work that you do is around the vision of the new Earth and how it almost is a reflection of past and ancient civilizations because we go in these cycles in our humanity, in our evolution. Could you, sort of like mention like how these ancient cultures can, you know, offer us lessons that we can apply today?
Yeah, okay. First of all, what you're saying about Three Eye Atlas is so interesting. And it's very interesting because I had found some information, and again, the detail, it may not be perfectly specific, but the suggestion was that, or perfectly accurate, but the suggestion was that Lemuria was a collaboration of the Lyrans, Pleiadians, Syrians, and wasn't the Arcturians. So it's very interesting that the knowledge that's coming in right now with Atlas is that it's another conglomeration, um, and that truly feels right. Um, whether there'll be a um, official disclosure or not, I don't know. I think people have to trust when they feel something is true.
I agree, but I think yeah, it's almost going to force um, that disclosure to take place because they won't be able to hide it, so it's going to become so apparent that.
And obvious, that would be very cool. But it's been very clever at things, how things get hidden. It's like hidden in plain sight. So I think that would be fabulous. And I look forward to October 29th. And now I'm going to look more into this. I do follow astrology a lot, but I don't, in terms of the cosmology, I haven't really paid a lot of attention, especially lately. So I think that'd be awesome.
So these
Some things
ancient civilizations then, so when we talk about, the past as giving us the clues for our future, like can you elaborate on like how they have been able to do that?
yes, as we remember, because our star seeds are coming in and becoming aware of who they are with very specific mission. And of course, part of what I find so awesome is it's not like 100, it's not like 1,000. There are millions coming in, and it's just in that sense, it's a wonderful, exciting time when we remember what it's like to live in a loving, peaceful, just world where everybody thrives, all beings thrive, then first of all, we break free of the belief that that can't exist because that's been part of the control. And we begin to remember how things were organized. Now, I think we're going to do it in a way that's never been done before. So I believe that we're going to pull in the foundations from when we were here and in other advanced civilizations um, to help create a foundation, I guess I would say. And having gone through this dimensional descent with some consciousness and then reclaiming our higher dimensional frequencies, I think we're going to be doing it from a much higher level of compassion, even. I mean, who knows? But
I love that. I 100% would agree with that. It's almost like why reinvent the wheel and do it as we did it before when, we're not the same. We've got all of this wisdom now from the expansion of the duality. So, we can actually transcend past mistakes this time around and hopefully not recreate them. I know a lot of people are, doomsdayers, but I've always been of the belief that the new Earth is, already here in a lot of cases for people that maintain their vibrational frequency. But there is a dystopic version of reality, I suppose, that's accessible for those that expect it almost. So this whole notion of the Earth splitting in several different factions is resonates with me as well. Do you feel that too?
yeah, simple answer. Yes. And I think a lot of times people don't realize when they really tune into that dystopian piece that they are helping to create it. Again, there's some complexity. Some people are just too scared, period, and just want to stay in their narrow place because it makes them feel safe. Other people are expanding, but think that the way to do it includes really focusing on this dystopian piece. Not how I see it, and obviously not how you see it. We create through what we focus on, and I'm not saying to ignore it, but to not feed it. And the other piece with that, the container that holds all sides is to understand, and really Barbara Hand Clow put this into her brilliant Alchemy of Nine Dimensions, um, is as soon as you feed one side of duality, right, you're feeding the other side. So you may think, oh, I'm on the side of right, but simply feeding that side feeds the other side as well. And that's kind of hard for us to really digest, but it's really important.
So what's the solution to that then? Being a bit of both.
Well, just understanding we hold it all. I
Mm.
think that's It is. We're not going to get, like my sort of daily prayer for the earth is that the light that's coming in and that's also coming out of the heart of the earth, which has absorbed it and is releasing it for us, shine on the dark so it stops doing harm. The dark in and of itself, no big deal if it doesn't do harm. It's the yin yang. But so the solution, I think, is to do our best to go into loving neutrality.
Mm, I love that. Loving neutrality. Yeah, so because that's it. So learning to love the shadows is where a lot of the time the focus has been on. So instead of beating yourself up about feeling guilt or shame, or just go, oh, I love that fact I've got that because it's stopping me from doing that again. It's like,
And one of the ways indigenous cultures worked with that is they would do it through plays. They would do it through what we would call theater, where you got to act out that stuff without doing any harm.
that's gorgeous. It's like role play in a way, isn't it?
Right.
So once someone has activated all aspects of their 12 strand DNA, what changes might they notice in their everyday life and in their relationships as well?
Okay, well, I don't think we're near activating our 12 strands, by the way. I think just what popped in is maybe six. Now, that doesn't mean there aren't some beings on the planet that are pretty close. But anyway, again, I feel like we're certainly not toward the end of the process yet. But it's interesting you asked that because I realized I really needed to think about what the changes have been. And I finally made a list. And I don't know, I can remember all that was on the list. Um, but certainly, one becomes hot, much more, one lives in the bigger picture, understands the bigger picture. The heart opens, compassion expands, empathy expands. Um, Being able to tune in, well, understanding everything is energy. And when you understand that, you sort of have a different relationship to the material world, helps you become less attached. I mean, many of this is, Eastern philosophy, Buddhism, and has put this forward as well. I literally think our cells absorb more light. And so thus the phrase enlightenment, I think that we're literally getting more light. And I like to think lighthearted with that. And understand that if we just step back and chill, there's a beautiful flow to it all.
Hmm.
Um, so that's part of the list that popped in.
Yeah, that's beautiful. So that you can see there's lots of benefits from actually doing the work.
Yeah,
It
right.
Yeah, 100%. So that's beautiful. So what's been your biggest breakthrough that you've had over the years? Your biggest aha moment?
Okay, well, that's again what occurred to me when I was in my 20s. I was reading the autobiography of a yogi by Yogananda and uh, doing yoga. And I would start my day off doing a little yoga, reading about 3 pages of that book. And then my psyche started expanding. When I was 12, I had a conversation with my father who told me he was an atheist, and he explained why. And I thought, yeah, that made sense. So I had defined myself as an atheist. Although, once the late 60s hit, I was always interested in astrology and yoga and tarot and that kind of thing. But I didn't associate it with divinity. In reading the book, and my consciousness began to open, and suddenly I could feel it. It's like I didn't have to, of course, God had been defined as this guy in the sky. When you actually experience that energy within, it's a whole different deal, so to speak. And that's what happened. And from then on, my whole life changed.
So you
Yep.
felt your own divinity.
Well, I felt the energy of the divinity.
Oh, wow.
I started seeing, I had a vision of reality beginning to open, so I would see more and more reality. I was in graduate school at the time, uh, learning to be a therapist, so I was aware enough of myself to be able to say, I don't have enough of a foundation to let this keep going. And I contained it with the awareness that more would be unfolding, but I slowed it down. Now, we hear about people that have these Kundalini experiences and they break wide open. I was able to consciously choose not for that not to happen, so that it became a little by little. But I call it my conversionary experience because I saw everything different after that. And my whole life shifted and got better and better. It's not without challenge, but things really changed.
Judith, did anything trigger that?
Um,
Did anything trigger that sort of that moment of realization?
oh, well, yes, having been reading that book,
Oh, it was the book.
yeah.
Okay.
Um,
So
yeah,
Yogananda then. So the Ascended Master Yogananda and his teachings. I hear this all the time, actually. It's interesting how Yogananda's energy is coming into the zeitgeist through, podcasts like Next Level Soul, Alex Ferrari, and some of the work of a lot of the Ascended Masters that exist on the planet right now um, that are bringing forth this wisdom. So it's interesting that you had yours, way back in was it in the 70s or the 80s?
it was the mid 70s, yeah.
Yeah, wow. So really you're what I would call an alpha generation indigo, so the first wave of galactic volunteers. And I came in as the second wave there, I think, as a beta generation. But you are a lot, for a lot of people that came in at the time that you did, they had the hardest time, and many, actually left the planet by suicide or because they couldn't cope with what the mission was. So, congratulations for sticking with the work that you've done and persevering, because I know it's the road less traveled. It's not easy. It's, but you're obviously, here to paint a picture of the new earth. So based on your visions and your teachings, what do you feel like it will look like?
Well, I, I, let's see, I have a couple of answers to that. One, I do have a recollection, and actually, it ended up as a very traumatic other lifetime, but it's not how it began. And it was on this planet, and probably in the Greece, Turkey area. I don't really, well, my guess is it was probably about 3,000 years ago. I remember living in a village that was very New Earth-like. Everybody, and I sort of see round structures. It wasn't indigenous, though, like a Native American Indian piece. Um, but the soul, every time a child was born, there was a real understanding of the soul and the purpose of the why the soul came in, and the whole community supported that. Um, my not so good ending was I felt my mission was to go and talk against the new uh, what do you call it? I'll call it government for lack of a better, more interesting word. That was patriarchy coming into Greece at that time. And it didn't end well for me. Let me put it that way. As a matter of fact, each time I begin to get more visible, I've had to deal with this. But remembering that village, it's like, and I know you know this, Hayden, it's like when you feel it at a cellular level. So I may not have all the details, but I can feel and I can see it. And one thing I really have fun doing, I haven't done it for years, but I've done this, when I've led like a little workshop at collective gatherings where I take people on a visualization of imagine. imagine what this would be like. And then I have them break into groups based on what their passion is. Are you passionate about the ecology? Are you passionate about animals? Are you passionate about healthcare? Passionate about spirituality? Where's your passion to get together and brainstorm what that might look like? So
I
that
love
that's
that.
part.
And that's beautiful. It's interesting because we host retreats in Perth, in the hills. We're actually just about to run our ninth one. We always do them over like Lionsgate, or we're doing this one on 9/11 to sort of shine light into that event over a period of 3 days. And actually, it's when we host these, we theme them. And the last one we did was passion, and it was actually getting people to really feel into that. And I totally align with what you're saying about the passion being pivotal, because that's where you sort of remember your mission. And if we're all doing our mission work, we're all feeling fulfilled. We're all tapping into our soul purpose, our gifts, our potential, and contributing to the collective in the most meaningful way. So a new earth paradigm that allows more people to be within that, instead of exchanging time for money or feeling like they are operating on old belief systems that were passed down through the family gene pool, where there is that sense of like, well, everything feels futile. So I love that, and actually, those curvaceous sort of homes where everything feels a little bit more community orientated, and everything is more cosmically aligned, feels like a really good possibility. Less of the linear lines that are disconnecting civilizations, creating barriers between us, and more, working with permaculture, I guess, as well, is the way I sort of see it. And no hierarchical structures, nobody sort of saying, if you do this, then there's going to be that punishment, because that goes right back to old religious principles where you're a sinner if you stray away from, said proposed path, which breeds guilt and shame and grief and all of that sort of stuff, doesn't it?
That's the control program, of
Mm.
course.
Hmm.
We're not born with guilt and shame.
No.
That's developed and programmed in some ways through the dysfunction in the culture.
And when you realize that, it's so freeing. It's so freeing, because it's the biggest misunderstanding of all, especially guilt. If
Yeah.
if everything is divine, then who are you that was the one person, in history that ever got it wrong? It's like, no, it's like
Right,
it's
and I think the piece is coming out of isolation as well. And that's been happening collectively, certainly since the 80s. But that collective movement, when you talk about, yes, it was hard for some star seeds, I'm sure the alpha star seeds for many, but on the other hand, we had it so good in other ways. And the hippie movement, the part of it that held these visions of, make love, not war, and ignore these crazy mass consciousness people that get upset because they don't like your hair or your clothes or whatever. There was a whole group, millions. If you look at Woodstock, even,
mm,
right? Well, not everybody was on the same page ultimately, and not everybody was able to um, go inward enough to keep a balance with it. There was so much support compared to other times. And even, your generation, things started to deteriorate. Like suddenly at concerts, you might have to worry somebody might steal your backpack. Where my generation in those days, nobody would steal anything from each other. I mean,
no.
that's naive on my part, but that's certainly how it felt. Is it was more let's share than take.
Oh, 100%. I agree with that. I was speaking to the lovely Ellen Goldberg, who wrote a book on palmistry with Dorian Bergen, and it's one of the most beautiful books. She's actually with the same publishing house as you, and she lives in Woodstock now. She said that it was just the most magical time where she found her people, and it was just this almost it's almost been sort of what's the word I'm looking for? Um, Glorified, in a way, as the golden era, because it was so special of love, really going back into the collective in such a powerful way. It's such a dualistic time on the planet as well, because obviously the Vietnam War, et cetera, as well. And I think you're right. Our generation certainly didn't feel that same sense of connectivity. And unfortunately, if you look at what's taking place, just even now, recently with the whole awful atrocities that happened in October in Israel, that was just, absolutely shocking. Um, so, you can see how the degeneration of these peace movements has happened so quickly, you know, just over a few decades.
Yeah. And, perhaps it's just another test or another growth experience. I mean, these are hard things, but all of that shadow stuff is coming up and getting really, it's hard for it to not be fully in our face. And I mean, I do think it has to come up to get cleared. It's just tragic because I do believe there was the potential to do this without the suffering. But that's clearly not the path that we're in right now.
Well, it's interesting because, I still feel like we can transcend that version of dystopia if we keep that vibration as high as possible. So, unfortunately, yeah, there may be a group of people that experience that, but like you don't have to join that party. You don't have to gate crash the worst party on in the universe. It's not gonna be everybody's version of reality. I truly believe that. So, with your Pleiadian connection, do you have an active dialogue with a Pleiadian collective at this point on your journey? Are you able to either channel the Pleiadians, or do you feel like they try and communicate and guide you telepathically or through the sacred geometry?
Um, well, I don't consider myself a channel. I'm more a downloader. Okay. Um, but I always call them in on a cellular level. And I do feel that the guidance is there. It's not crystal clear delineated kind of piece. And the other, I'm trying to say five things at once. Let me go to one. Um, it's very clear that the guidance is there for me. Whether it's only Pleiadians, I'm not sure. But when I'm working with people, I will stop and I will go in and I will be given information that I could put out then and say, this is what I'm getting. How does that feel to you? So they work with me in those ways. Um, and I do visualize being in the Pleiades with them and just really working to heal Earth, among other things. So, um, but again, I don't feel like it doesn't feel right to call myself a channel per se. Um, I guess that's the most I can describe it.
I identify with that 100%, because it's almost like, putting a label on it as a channel, again, is um I don't know. It's for me, I feel into that, and it feels a little bit egocentric. And it's more of an organic process. So you are identifying that you're receiving this information without phantasmagorizing it, if that's a word. You know what
Said
I'm
without
saying, though, don't
offense. Um, yeah, I mean, that's tricky. And again, I think everybody's mission is a little different. So some people are getting clear dialogue information coming through that they are putting into their books, into their teachings. And nothing is 100% because it's still coming through us as humans. So even the best channel is going to have, a place of error, potential error that I think we just need to be aware of.
Yeah, 100%. I love that. I love that. So, is there any last piece of information that you would like to offer anybody who's watching this conversation today that you feel is going to be beneficial for them as we move through, between now and basically 2032?
Right. I think that what I want to put out that may be the most helpful is for people to realize we're not perfect. This is a process. And it's really important, one, to learn to be really supportive of ourselves. An example is, okay, a nasty thought flies through my head. I notice the thought. I don't want it there, but it's there anyway. I give myself credit for noticing. Ways to kind of cheer ourselves on as we go through this process and to have realistic expectations. And the other piece, which I think is equally, if not more important, is to clear those old emotions. Um, People can get very evolved and very high on spiritual information. But if the emotional field isn't clear, they may be able to put it in over here in a little container, but it's going to impact things. It's there. So as hard as it is for people to really go through some of those energy and emotional clearing journeys, because if you're dealing with a lot of trauma, it's not fun, but it is freeing and it gives you a sense of wholeness and well-being that's essential. So that would be my final.
Yeah, and do you know what, Judith? I agree with that 100% because it forms the basis of the work that I do as well. And I find it so rewarding personally, but also I see the difference that it makes for people, especially if they commit, to their unfulfillment, because you can't just expect one session to do it all. You've got to commit yourself to going through it systematically. And I think one of the beautiful things about you is that you've got that psychotherapy background, so you understand process, you understand what it takes to guide somebody properly through the release, the letting go, and then the integration of new energies. So, where can people find you?
My website is empoweringthespirit.com. That's the easiest way to find me. I mean, I'm on YouTube, uh, I'm on social media, but go to my website. You'll find all of that information there as well.
Brilliant. Okay, so what I'll do is I'll put a link in the description so people can easily find you. I was exploring your YouTube channel earlier on actually, and you are on 333 subscribers. So I wanted to leave it at that. I'm going to go and subscribe to it now myself because I just thought it was quite interesting that sort of very powerful number was there when I visited. And also the image that you use as your banner, it almost reminds me of a very, very significant dream I had probably a couple of years ago, where I sort of woke up and I saw this beautiful bird that looked just like that flying within this house that I was in. But it was almost like a conservatory, and this bird was just inside this vast conservatory with all this glass, and it was illuminated by the sunshine behind it. I thought it was a bin chicken in my dream, but it just reminded me of that. So it was like, oh, okay. So there's a connection between you and I, which I
Hi.
think
So
is
that sounds Hayden. Yeah, it's um, a heron, a blue heron, which is a spirit guide for me. But that soaring, beautiful wingspan, it sounds like is what got illuminated
Beautiful.
during.
Yeah, no, absolutely. That's wonderful. Well, thank you so much for sharing your incredible wisdom and light with us today, Judith. You're truly a gift to humanity, offering both tools and techniques to be able to help people step into their fullest potential. And for anyone who's watching, like I would highly recommend diving into Judith's book, the 60 Ascension Journey, activating the light codes in our 12-strand DNA and exploring all of her other powerful writings as well. Remember, Judith's written 4 books, so she's a bit of a pro. As always, thank you for joining us on Cosmic Conversations. If you've found today's information valuable, then please consider subscribing, liking, and sharing the video to help the growth of this channel. And if you're a fellow starseed who's really fully ready to step up into your true potential, keep watching future episodes of not only this, but also the numerology show, where I interview the world's leading numerology authors as well. So until next time, stay luminous and keep walking your ascension path with courage, clarity, and love. Thanks very much for being with me again, Judith.